Do you feel like the real estate industry is obsessed with leads, but no one is talking about how to convert them?
We wanted to give you a system to take each lead and opportunity that comes in and convert them to a client and referrer for life. Build Your Own Business will walk you through how to prioritize and work each lead so that no one slips through the cracks.
Find out more at hustlehumblypodcast.com/BYOB.
Walkthroughs is when I really learned in life that clean is a subjective designation.
Look, guys, this is to make sure that the house is still here before we sign papers.
Right.
Refrigerator, washer, dryer, oven, dishwasher, doorknob. You've been burned. Right.
I'm spackling holes 8 months pregnant because I've got to get you to close.
Right. I do have 2 or 3 cleaning ladies that I keep on speed dial.
Right.
Hi, y'all. Welcome to Hustle Humbly. It's Alyssa and Katie, and we are 2 top producing realtors in the Baton Rouge market.
We work for 2 different companies where we should be competitors, but we have chosen community over competition.
The goal of our podcast is to encourage you to find your own way in business.
So stop comparing yourself and start embracing your strengths.
Hi, Alyssa.
Hey, Katie.
How are you?
I'm great.
Wonderful. It is episode number 207. Walkthrough.
Okay.
We're just simply going to walk through today.
Okay.
This is one of those parts of the process that we've not talked about specifically.
Yeah.
But it's come up.
Mm-hmm. We've just never dedicated a whole episode to it.
I think it needs a whole episode.
Yeah.
Because it's such a vital part of the process that some people skip.
Yes.
Yes. All right. So let's start with the basics. What is a walkthrough?
Our purchase agreement reads that you have within 5 days of closing to go do your final walkthrough. It's really just to make sure the house is in the same or better condition as when you made your offer.
Right.
It is to check for repairs. It is to check to make sure that everything that you agreed upon to stay is there and that all the terms of the contract have been met.
Okay. I assume everywhere they do a walkthrough.
I would hope so.
Is a walkthrough a time to do an additional inspection?
No. And lately, I get that. I've been having more and more buyers bring the inspector to the final walkthrough.
If they're checking repairs, I think this is acceptable, but it is not a time to open a new can of worms by doing additional inspections.
Right.
Your due diligence has passed. So even if you found something at that point, if it was the same as it was during your inspection period, you can't now ask for the repair.
Right.
Now, if the AC stopped working, the seller has to make it into the same condition it was in at your original inspection.
Right.
And your original time you wrote the offer. But it is kind of a delicate situation. Would you bring an inspector with you?
No.
Yeah.
No.
And how's it going with the ones that are bringing an inspector with them?
I feel like they usually find something to nitpick about.
Yeah.
Even if it's a repair that we agreed to and provided a receipt for,
They don't like
the
it.
inspector will kind of make a fuss about it and I think that's where, because to me, I'm a very, it's either yes or no.
Black and white.
Black and white person. So if you have a receipt from a company
It's
that
been done.
shows that it was done, there's really nothing to further discuss.
Right.
Unless there is something new.
Right. Then we're literally checking how they did the repair.
Yeah. And that's why I do tell my buyers, it is best to ask for money.
Money. Always money.
Instead of repairs. If you want to go back and listen to any of our inspection episodes.
The due diligence episode.
Yes. Those would be good ones on how to handle, how to write a repair request, because you have to be so specific.
Right.
Because sellers will do a repair differently than a buyer.
Right. And you have to be making that repair request, thinking ahead to the walkthrough and the closing, and how do we actually get to the closing table? If I ask for 20 nitpicky things, the seller says yes, but then they do them themselves. It's an ugly repair. It's not done to your liking. All of a sudden, maybe the list of 20 things is only worth $500, but all of a sudden it's becoming a major problem that's going to hold up closing or potentially cost the whole deal.
Yeah. Have you ever had one fall through at a walkthrough?
Not at a walkthrough, but I've gotten really close. I've had more than one buyer who was like, I will not go. And here's the other thing. You really have people over a barrel at this point, because even if it's your buyer and the seller has done something wrong, the buyer just says, well, you didn't do it. I'm not going to go to closing. And you've got to get them to closing. So we're going to look at this, I guess, from both angles. When I'm representing the buyer, I want to make sure that everything's done the way they asked it to be done and that they're happy, but I'm not going to let them go to closing with loose ends, right?
Right.
So it's got to be sorted out if there's something they're unhappy about, because that's the only time that you have leverage. Once you sign the papers, whether the seller says, oh yeah, I'll come back and handle that later or not, you don't have any leverage after you close.
Right.
We're talking about a legal proceeding at that point to get them to do something. And especially if they just said it verbally. No, I want it in writing. I want it done. This is the last time that we have any leverage. As the listing agent, I want to make sure that my seller is doing all the things they said they were going to do, or I would prefer them give money.
Right.
And I will convince my sellers and my buyers of that. It's just a lot easier because money is black and white.
Same. Yeah.
Either you gave the $500 or you didn't give the $500. But it doesn't mean, oh, you repaired this piece of wood and the paint doesn't match and now we're mad.
Especially when it is something a little bit ambiguous. Like, I always think back to, the stucco incidents I have had.
Yeah.
You can replace it. You can repair it. You can patch it. You can paint it. Like, there's so many different ways, and every way is going to look a little bit different. And so money in a situation like that is what it is. Something like having the HVAC cleaned and serviced, to me, I feel comfortable asking for that, because a AC company has to come out and give a receipt.
Right.
And I tell my buyers, look, if you have any problems after closing, call the AC company that the sellers used. That's who this would kind of fall under.
Yeah.
It just puts it. But if it's something that a seller could do,
right,
I'm like, no, let's just ask for money.
I think that happens too with like electrical issues. It's either like the light switch works or it doesn't. There's a GFCI outlet or there's not. Like, I feel like with a receipt and an actual just testing the thing, it's done.
Right. There's not like it's kind of working.
Yeah, like there's room for interpretation.
Yeah.
Because you can't put anything back into its original condition. So it is a little bit of a fine line. It's always more like the rotten wood, a crack in a stucco, something that can be repaired, or like a leak in a pipe. Well, yes, it's not leaking now, but maybe it's covered in foam or they've done something weird. There's always something in the attic where it was like, a vent wasn't connected. And then the way they connected it was, it was connected, but it wasn't the way it should have been. Like,
right.
Ugh.
Right.
Okay. So we know what it is. You told us what the purchase agreement says, but when do you like to go do a walkthrough, your final walkthrough?
It's tough because I really do like to do them right before closing, because you kind of want to see it at the last minute possible before you sign everything.
Yeah.
But if there's an issue that could hurt you, so I kind of it really depends on the house for me.
Yeah.
So if it's a vacant house and we weren't asking for repairs, I usually like to go before closing, like maybe even the morning of closing or the night before, because it was vacant when we saw it the first time. We didn't ask for repairs. We got money.
Yeah.
There really shouldn't be anything there. But if it's a situation where we need to check repairs, or I have a very nervous, picky buyer, or I have a dad that's coming and going to critique everything, I would like to go at least 2 days before.
Yeah.
But I do like to wait until the sellers are out. Have moved out.
Yes.
Like if they say, oh, well, the sellers are still boxing up things, just look around. I'm like, no, I'll just wait till it's empty.
Empty is important.
Yes.
Sometimes hard to do if there's an occupancy situation. But in most cases, that's the same. I would want to do my final walkthrough within 24 hours.
Yeah.
So typically afternoon before, morning of. You want to leave the least amount of time possible for something to change.
Yes.
You can't go 4 days in advance and just assume that it's going to be okay at closing. You don't know. You haven't been there that recently. But I do agree. If you have a long list of repairs that there is room for interpretation, maybe you've almost got to do 2 walkthroughs.
Yeah.
Maybe you've got to go check repairs a week out if they're done. And because ours says you have to have them done 5 days out, right? So you can go then. And then you go right before morning of, like just to make sure nothing flooded or like.
Yes, a pipe didn't burst. There wasn't
Right.
a storm in the area. A tree limb. I've had tree limbs fall.
Yes, I've heard people have like they moved. I had this myself. Moved. They took the refrigerator. They didn't cap off the water line, and so there's water everywhere from the refrigerator. Or they unhooked the washing machine and that started leaking. Like sometimes things can happen because you've moved.
Right.
So you really do want to check it really close to closing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that takes care of the when. I think, again, you can maybe do twice if you've got to check a lot of repairs. I agree. You want to go when the sellers are gone or moved out.
I also tell my buyers, especially if we're showing a house that is really nicely decorated or staged, because sometimes when they see it empty and sparse the first time with just like a couple nails on the wall and
They're like,
dust.
I don't love it anymore.
Yeah. I'm like, listen, when we come back for the final walkthrough, none of this decor will be here.
Right.
So sometimes the final walkthrough is like exciting and sometimes they feel a little like nervous and disappointed.
Yeah, like,
Yeah. And so if it's an occupied home that looks really good furnished, I do try to remind them of that during the home inspection.
Yeah.
Like, look, when we come back, it's going to be empty.
I think another thing I like to do in a walkthrough is get there a minute or two early and get in there and turn on all the lights.
Mhm.
There's nothing worse than walking into a vacant house that's dark and dreary. And you're right. All of a sudden you're like, I don't have the warm and fuzzies like I did before.
Yeah, now it's empty.
At least open the windows and turn on the lights.
Mhm.
And that way it's like, oh, all right, we're alive. This house is alive. Which brings me to another important point. When it comes to my sellers, there are things that I'm reminding them. The utilities have to be on
Yes.
all the way until closing, especially if legally in our contract, that's the way it's written. The buyer can say, I don't want to close if the utilities are not on.
Right.
Because they need to be able to check. Is everything still working? If the utilities aren't on, how can I check?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of reminders along the templates, right?
Yeah.
Telling the sellers, leave your utilities on.
I had a situation this year where a young first-time home buyer, I had the listing, so I had the seller. And we were under contract, past inspections, past appraisal, and the buyer's agent called me and was like, he is not comfortable with his monthly note and he wants to cancel.
Like, no.
Long story short, he didn't, because I let them know that we would be pursuing legal action because it was just a few days before closing. Yeah. But when I went to get my my sign a few days before closing, because I was in the area, I noticed that the electricity had been turned off. And I did not want them to know.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want to give him any kind of possible out.
Right.
Like technically the purchase agreement reads utilities have to stay on until closing.
They're not. I don't have to
they're
close.
Not. I'm not closing. Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks for giving me that out. If you have a nervous buyer that's looking for an out, the walkthrough is very stressful.
Very stressful. I find the walkthrough to be far more stressful than the inspection.
When I'm the buyer's agent, I'm usually not too worried about it.
Yeah.
Because I know that my buyers are usually not trying to get out of it.
Yeah.
And I can handle if there is something wrong at this point, we'll figure something out.
Yeah.
But as a listing agent, when I see the final walkthrough has been scheduled, I get a little nervous.
Okay. Do you give your seller any reminders, or like, what are you telling your sellers?
Yeah. So I ask my sellers to please have the house professionally cleaned.
Yeah.
I know that it's like $200-$300 maybe, but it'll help you and me and them, and everyone will be much happier.
Yeah.
Our purchase agreement basically just states that it has to be free of trash and debris and swept.
Which is not clean toilets.
No, that's not clean. But I think that it just makes for a better, so I asked them to make the buyer's final walkthrough, exciting for them. Let's have it nice and clean.
Right.
Let's make sure that if there was anything that happened with the walls, that we go ahead and address that while you were moving. Maybe leave them a little note on the counter with some information that they would need to know about the neighborhood, neighbors, alarm codes, and things like that.
Right.
Anything that they can walk in and go, wow, this is so helpful.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I asked them to do.
You get a lot of questions from sellers about things like nails in the wall, like things like that. What has to stay, what goes. The nails in the wall, I say this a lot, or the cleanliness. I'm like, how would you want to find, you're moving. How do you want to find the house you're going to?
Mm-hmm.
Leave this house like that. Sometimes it'd be like, well, the house I went to didn't clean and it was gross. I'm like, but wouldn't you have
How'd
preferred?
that make you feel?
Right. So we're not going to be that person. You know,
Mhm.
2 wrongs does not make a right. And I also, walkthroughs is when I really learned in life that clean is a subjective designation.
Right.
Some people probably thought that that was clean.
Right.
Other people, I mean, I've had clients that were like military and they were like, for their walkthrough, they swept their attic.
Oh
When they
my
were the
gosh.
seller.
Wow.
They swept the attic, like the walkway was, like she kept a very tight ship.
Mhm.
But clean is subjective. So
Right.
what you could have eaten off the floor at her walkthrough.
Yeah.
Around the corner, someone else thinks they have cleaned, and it is like,
Not clean.
no,
Mm-mm.
no, this is not clean. So I just have to also remind my buyers, clean is subjective. Yes, they're required to remove trash and debris, but they're not required to professionally clean, make sure the toilets, you're going to have to expect to clean. It is a house that you are buying that has been lived in.
Mhm.
So I think setting the expectation is really important.
If they have a ton of pictures hanging on the wall and they look great while you're there for the showing,
I know.
they may not look great when the photos aren't there for the final walkthrough and there's either patches or nails.
Let me tell you this. When we sold our last house, we'd been there 2 years. We built it. So we're the original owners. We had pictures everywhere. That's how the buyers saw it. I am, picturing myself as how I would want to be as a buyer and what I've seen in my business. And we patched every hole and touched it up with paint. And when they came in for the walkthrough, because they were unrepresented, so I was there, they came in, they're like, you did have stuff on the walls, didn't you? And I'm like,
wow.
yeah. And they're like, wow, it looks like the house is brand new. And I'm like,
Aw.
that's what I want you to feel like.
Yeah, I want you to feel that it looks nice.
I don't want you to walk into work. I want you to be like, I'm so excited to take this over from you. So
I do have 2 or 3 cleaning ladies that I keep on speed dial
right.
because of emergency situations.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's like it's not that bad. Or if
Mhm.
I don't have a great closing gift for them
Yeah.
at the closing table, I'll say, hey, my cleaning lady is coming this afternoon.
That
She's
is a
going to
great
clean the
closing
house.
gift.
It's a great closing gift.
Yeah, I love that.
So I always have them there as just sort of, they know it.
Yeah.
It could be at a moment's notice, and one of the 3 of them can usually
Hopefully.
get there.
Mm-hmm.
But it just makes it so worth it.
Yeah. You want the buyer to have a positive experience. I also like to remind my seller that you have to mow the lawn. That comes up more than I would like to.
Yeah.
And I'm like, have you mowed the lawn? You have to mow the lawn, especially if they've moved a week or 2 before. Maybe they've taken the lawn. I'm like, you have to call a lawn service. Someone has to mow the lawn.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is packing. Like, did you clean out the attic?
Mm.
Did you take the stuff in the storage room? For whatever reason, don't you find that sellers think they're doing you a service by leaving you all this junk in the storage room?
Yeah.
Here's all my old paint cans and all my old bug spray and all my old. I get that you don't want to move that, but you can't just assume that the
they
buyer
want it.
wants that, especially if it's an old crusty paint can. I don't think it's going to work anymore.
Right.
Like, did you that is inheriting trash.
Mm-hmm.
But I also have to prepare my buyers. Hey, it's typical for sellers to leave a lot of things in the storage room that belong to the house.
Yes.
Oh, well, here's some leftover tile.
yeah. Thanks.
What are we going to do with it? Here?
Yeah.
I've had more times than I like to admit. Here's a package of shingles. Shingles?
What if you ever need them for a roof leak?
I guess that's what they're there for.
Yeah.
I'm like, you, Mrs. Efficiency, and that doesn't keep a lot, I would think would be like, I don't want this pack of shingles.
Yeah. The first thing I actually did when we were moving is I had them empty the storage room. It
'Cause
wasn't
there's
our stuff.
So much stuff.
It was just super old paint that I was like, I don't. Yeah.
Rusty tools.
I couldn't even read what the names were.
Exactly. So keep that in mind. Remind your sellers that we don't want anyone to inherit their trash.
Mhm.
Okay, let's talk about what exactly happens while you're in the walkthrough. What exactly does Alyssa do?
I walk in, have all the lights on. I do try to get there early, and I remind them, look, guys, this is to make sure that the house is still here
Right.
before we sign papers.
Right.
Is the refrigerator, washer, dryer here if we ask for it? What about the window treatments? I
Right.
actually just went through a walkthrough last week, and the window treatments and the hardware was gone. And she said, I said, what would you like to do about that? And she said, well, I really didn't care for the curtains. I was planning on removing the curtains, but not having hardware is like the curtain rods. That is not exciting for me.
Yeah.
So we ended up getting like $250. She was happy with it and it was fine.
I had a story of my listing.
Okay.
We had it was on the market for a while, several years ago. Finally, we get the thing closed. The buyer is a nightmare. It's just difficult. My lady is like a recent divorcee. She's like, I just have to sell this house. The buyer is the worst. The buyer wants went on and on and on about repairing the tub, the jacuzzi tub.
Oh my gosh.
We had to spend hundreds upon hundreds of dollars to finally figure out she just wasn't pushing the button right. Like there was some really silly thing going on. And when we finally got it going, she didn't like something else about it. And we're like, what is the deal with this jacuzzi tub? She was like, well, I mean, when I take people on a tour, I want them to see everything. I'm like, are they getting in the jacuzzi tub? How many people are touring your house? Like the logic was so weird. Well, so she had been nothing but trouble.
The agent?
The buyer.
When she takes people on tour.
I guess when she moved in, she was going to be taking all her friends to tour her house.
Okay.
Like,
Continue.
What kind of tour are you running over here?
Right. Okay.
Well, then my seller, sweet seller, had all of her family helping her because she's now a single mom. They take the curtains and the rods. And I think the curtains were supposed to go, but the rods were supposed to, regardless, the rods were supposed to stay. I don't remember if both were whatever. Well, of course, when our very not happy buyer from the whole process shows up, she is losing her marbles about these rods. And I feel like she didn't do a walkthrough because this was happening after closing.
Good.
Like she shows up after closing. The rods are gone. She's so mad. On and on and on. I call my seller and I'm like, hey, do you have these rods? Do you were supposed to leave them. I need to get them back to her. She's like, okay, no problem. My uncle was helping me. I didn't tell him. He didn't. It was an accident.
Sure.
I get all the rods. The agent is involved at this point. I'm like, the rods are now at my office. If you can get them anytime you want. They never came to get the rods. Like they didn't really want them.
No.
They were just angry about everything.
Mad.
And I'm like,
it's not about the rod. We had a lawsuit recently where the drapes were gone.
Okay.
And the rods were there.
Right.
And the seller would not give them back because they were made by her grandma to match the bedspread.
You're like, no, I need them.
I'm taking them. I'm not parting with them. And the thing is, I don't think that the new buyer really wanted them.
What? It's just the
They
point.
weren't cute. I mean, my goodness. They were like, ew. I mean, they matched a bedspread, if that tells you anything. So.
Right. It's not a good sign.
And they went to court over it. They sued each other over these drapes. I don't know how it
There's
ended.
other stuff going on there.
Yeah,
but you're
sure.
right. It's terrible. So you have to remind the seller over and over again, does your fridge need to stay? Does your washer dryer? Don't forget you got to leave the TV mounts. Like what has to stay? Because that's the stuff that's going to come up in the walkthrough and be sometimes hard to remedy.
Yeah.
Oh, I had in a walkthrough for my buyer, the seller took this giant concrete fountain from the front courtyard.
No.
And truth be told, I learned a hard lesson because it was plugged in. And when you unplugged it, it didn't alter the property.
Right. It wasn't technically attached to the land.
Yeah, but we were all like this giant hundreds of pounds fountain. No one thought it would go.
Right.
And they, again, were not in a great place and it had been a bad transaction. And they took literally anything that wasn't nailed down.
I had to laugh a little bit because I got a purchase agreement from a realtor and it was like, under things to remain, you would usually write refrigerator, washer, dryer. It was like refrigerator, washer, dryer, oven, dishwasher, doorknob. I'm like,
you've been burned.
Yep. That's what my first thought was. You've been burned. You're just covering your tracks here.
We're not going to we're not leaving anything up to chance.
No. Mm-mm.
Yeah, and that's what the walkthrough is for, though, for your buyer to make sure everything is there that's supposed to be there. So I think you have to remember that's important. Now, do you do a walkthrough on every single house?
I think so.
Yeah, why would you not?
Yeah.
You got to do it on new construction. You got to do it because you're making sure it's there.
Mm-hmm.
And who comes to the walkthrough? you're not taking an inspector. You're going.
Yeah, just me and my buyers.
Yeah,
usually.
just you
they
and the
don't
buyer.
usually bring their parents. Like all the people that came for the home inspection are not usually there for the walkthrough.
Yeah.
I try to let them know this shouldn't take more than 10 minutes. We're not going to be there forever. This isn't the home inspection. This should be a quick walkthrough to make sure that we check everything and that utilities are on and that you're ready to move in.
Do you bring anything with you to the walkthrough?
I don't think so.
I like to print my repair list if there is one or a receipt if I need it, just so that I have it to quickly look back at and be like, okay, well, here's the 5 things we have to check. And then once we've checked them, I'm like, we're good. I also like to bring the walkthrough form where they sign and say, we walked through.
Yeah.
And it was okay.
Great.
This is not a required form.
I know. I think that I almost wish my office would require it. I actually just had an email from an agent I closed with last week asking me for my buyer signed walkthrough form. And I'm like, I didn't have them sign anything. And I kind of wish we had it as a requirement.
Yeah, so I will say I am probably 75% of the time good about getting it. And it kind of depends on the situation, if both of the buyers were there, if, it's kind of, because when something's optional, you're not as vigilant about it. But I will say I've needed it more times than I'd like to admit to be like, well, you walked. And you sign, and even sometimes I'll take it to the walkthrough, and if I forget to get him to sign there, I'll have him sign him at closing.
Yeah.
And I'll be like, because we're all there then with our pins out. And I'm like, hey, just signing off that you did your walkthrough and everything was okay in the house. And I do think that is a practice that everyone should probably have in their business because it will cover you in case of a problem later.
Another thing to think about is you have to be careful what you write in your listing description and what is in the actual purchase agreement because the purchase agreement trumps anything else.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what. You could have said everything in the listing description.
Yes. For example, this was probably my year 2.
Okay.
And I had the listing and it was one of my first listings. And I wrote in the listing description, to top it off, the refrigerator, washer, and dryer can remain with the home. It was a very, very old refrigerator, washer, dryer. Very old. Okay. Like the sellers didn't want it. They even tried to sell them.
Nobody wanted it.
We get an offer and they did not ask for them. And under items to remain, it was just like NA. So I'm like, look, they don't want the refrigerator. And she was like, yeah, I figured nobody would want these things. She tried to sell them on Facebook. She tried to give them away. She tried to donate them. Nobody would take them. They were just super old. So they had a friend come over and put them at the road. Buyer's agent does not do a final walkthrough. We close. Everybody at closing is so happy. An hour after closing, I get a frantic call from buyer's agent that's like, Alyssa, the refrigerator, washer, dryer is gone. And my heart sank because I'm like, that?
You couldn't remember.
Yeah, I'm like, what? I think we talked about this. So I sent her like a screenshot of the contract. I'm like, you did not ask for it.
Right.
She sends me back a screenshot of MLS saying that it can remain. And I'm like, that doesn't matter. And her broker was like, I'm sorry. Like, unfortunately, she's right. Like, you have to put it in the contract if you want it to be part of the active sale. She lost all of her commission.
Buying.
And more because it wasn't a huge house. And she had to buy like new ones. Like refrigerator, washer, and dryer.
Yeah.
I mean, I felt so bad for her and I learned so much because seeing her go through that made me go, especially as a new agent, I was like, oh my gosh.
Does that make you now as a listing agent? Do you ever double check? Like if your seller's like, we don't want them, we're going to throw them away. Do you go back now and are like, hey, did you want them? Because I do
save
feel
it
like
for inspections.
Me too.
So like if they don't ask for it and I know my sellers would leave it, I'll just wait until inspections and be like,
we'll
look.
leave the washer, dryer, fridge. Yeah, I agree with that's a great way to go with it.
But yeah, now I double check like,
more than once, right? You're like, what happened?
Don't want that to happen.
Okay. Hi, friends. We owe you a huge debt of gratitude, and we wanted to say thank you for writing reviews for the show. And why do we want to say thank you?
It is because of the number of reviews that we have that Jenna Kutcher reached out to us to be on the podcast.
That's right. So your reviews not only help other people know what the podcast is about and if they should listen and if it would be good for them, it also helps the guests that we want to bring you to give you more value realize we're a show worth coming on.
Yes, the reviews give us credibility and allows us to bring these people on. So a huge thank you to everyone that has left us a review.
Yes, thank you so much. Keep bringing on those reviews. So when I'm in the house, we've gone in, we're checked the repairs. I also like to check cabinets, drawers, storage room, trash, and then the attic. I don't go in attics, but I do. If there was a lot of stuff up there, I might tell the buyer, hey, if you want to pop in and just make sure it's empty, that's on you. But that's not a service I provide.
I don't go in your attic.
I don't go in attics, but you might want to look in there because you want to make sure everything is gone. There's always a kitchen drawer left behind.
I know.
I don't know what it happens with people, but there's one drawer in the kitchen that are like, oh, I just totally forgot that one.
Yeah.
Or a bathroom drawer or whatever. But, check them all. Do you do any like running of appliances or water or flushing toilets?
Run them. We do check and make sure that the water is on, that the gas is on if it has gas, that, but we don't like run the dishwasher again.
I usually just turn on all the faucets, check to look underneath the cabinet, make sure there's not puddles of water anywhere. I'll flush a toilet. That's probably, I'm not going around and re-inspecting.
No.
I do think it's important probably to walk around outside, see if there are any red flags out there.
I like to check the mailbox one last time before I head to closing.
So you can take them if it's theirs.
Yeah, any other mail for the old clients.
Last call for mail. Okay, I have a story for you.
Oh, good.
I had a client. He was my seller. He was not very nice. In fact, he was not someone that made it on my database.
Okay. Yeah.
He was not very nice at all. He yelled at me many times. And then I had a buyer who, probably because the seller wasn't very nice, wasn't having a very fun time. And I don't think they did a final walkthrough, or they did the final walkthrough and were like, everything was fine. We went to closing. Hours after closing, the buyer is calling me, the listing agent.
The buyer had their own agent?
Yeah.
Okay.
So angry at me.
Oh.
I remember this vividly because it was like a Friday afternoon. And I'm like lounging in a hammock on the back porch, like day's done.
Yeah.
Woo! So angry because my seller left the wood pile in the backyard, like the firewood. And I'm like, okay, well, that's the firewood that he used for the fireplace. You can use it. Obviously, he didn't want it. She's like, I don't want it. And he needs to come and get it.
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, he doesn't really have to come and get it. And I didn't really care for him. And so I'm like, here's his number. Good luck.
Right. You two can duke it out. Did they fall in love and get married?
Doesn't matter to me. I never followed up. I was like, no, thank you. I said, look, he's not required to come and get it now, but you're welcome to follow up with him.
Wow. That is so funny.
Wash my hands of this.
Wouldn't that be funny if they were like meant for each other?
I don't know. I don't think so. But I was like, oh my. But I have had more times than one when people after closing are like, but this. And I'm like, but you walked through.
Right.
You saw it.
Yeah.
Like, we're done. Okay. I have another one about holes in the wall.
Oh.
My seller, we're at closing. They have done the walkthrough. I'm trying to remember if we're at it was right. They do it right before closing.
Okay.
I am 8 months pregnant. The buyer is an engineer. And my clients in one of the bedrooms, spare bedroom, had some shelving that was hung that was like really removable. I mean, it was like a picture frame, right?
Yeah.
They take down the shelves. There are like several holes in the wall. The buyer is not going to come to closing about these screw holes in the wall. So upset. And I'm like, my seller couldn't go, didn't, whatever. I just bought spackle, 8 months pregnant, and went and spackled the holes.
Oh my gosh.
It took me 5 minutes. They weren't that bad.
Yeah.
They weren't that bad. I took a picture. I went to closing. At closing, the buyer is still so upset about this. And I'm like, look, it's done.
Yeah, it's done.
Done. We're not talking about it anymore. It's done. Because they wanted to keep like $100, $300. I'm like, no. This is like a $5 can of spackle. We're not doing this.
Right.
I'm like, if I could do it, you could have handled it.
So did they let it go?
It closed.
Were they pleased?
I don't, not my client.
Yeah.
But I did the best I could to solve the problem.
Right.
But I'm like,
we're not doing this. Yeah.
Remember last week with the glamour? This is the stuff you really do.
Yeah. Right.
I'm spackling holes 8 months pregnant because I got to get you to close.
Right.
And you're losing your marbles over these. It was not that bad.
Yeah.
It was not that bad. Okay. What happens though? What are our course of action, our remedies if there is trouble?
Oh man, I guess it depends on the trouble, but usually at that point, we're collecting some money.
Yeah.
Like if you're not happy with something that was or wasn't done, at this point, it's obviously not going to be done or done to your satisfaction. So we're going to just ask for money. I had a situation one time where I've only had one deal ever where they canceled during the final walkthrough.
They were like, no, I'm not coming. What was it?
The HVAC was not working.
Yeah.
And it wasn't going to work. It needed to be totally replaced. But it was a house that someone had flipped.
Okay.
And my clients were like younger first-time home buyers. And
you were the listing?
No, I was the buyer. I had the buyers. And I even felt like from the beginning, they were kind of trying to convince themselves to like this house.
Yeah.
It checked the boxes on paper of what they were looking for, but it was just kind of shoddy work.
Yeah.
And we kept getting not great vibes from the seller and just the way negotiations were going. And I was trying to keep their head focused on the house and not the seller. Mm-hmm. But they just kept going back to that. Oh, and even at the inspection, I said, y'all just don't seem. No, we're very excited. We're very excited.
No, not.
And I was like, okay. And so we did the final walkthrough and we walk in and it is hot. And the AC is running. Like you can hear it working.
It's struggling.
It is struggling, but it clearly hasn't been working in days. And so I'm like, okay, it's okay. This has to be fixed. You know, you don't have to close. It has to be fixed. And so I said, we're going to get an AC company out there. And they're like, I think we had even asked for some sort of AC repair or something. And when we got this AC receipt, it was like,
sketchy.
Mm-hmm. She's like, I don't want them to call their AC company again. I don't trust this seller. I don't trust this AC company. And in my head, I'm thinking, me either.
You're like,
I don't either. I agree. And so I called the listing agent who had been okay. And I said, would you mind if I just called like a local AC company to come look at this? And she was like, sure, whatever. And they were like, it cannot be saved. It is just...
This one's dead.
It is so dead. Like, the repairs would cost so much. Like, and so the seller, they did not buy the house. I'm trying to remember what happened, but my buyers did not purchase the house.
So, obviously, the seller wasn't going to change the AC.
I think that he was willing to, but it wasn't going to be done in time for closing. And so they opted that.
They're like, you know what? It's a sign.
It's a sign. Like, they would have had to sign an extension.
Yeah.
And that's not required of them.
No.
It wasn't done within the parameters of the contract time frame. So the seller was like, look, we ordered the new HVAC. It'll be installed next week. I'm sorry, we're closing tomorrow. We're canceling. It was a tough one. That
is a hard one.
It kept me up. But and I had to advise them. Because they asked me, like, we don't want it. What do we do? And I was like, I had to be honest and say, technically.
That's it. You don't have to.
You don't have to. I was not in it was hard.
No, that's really hard.
And they ended up somewhere so much better.
You're right. They knew in their heart that wasn't the one.
I just wish it didn't take that.
I think that bringing up extensions, it's a great time to talk about that with walkthrough. If something bad comes up, you better find a way for all the parties to agree on a remedy that can happen in time for closing, because you're right. No one has to give an extension. Seller doesn't have to. buyer doesn't have to. Now, if the seller didn't do a repair or did something in bad faith, I think there would be more of a legal battle there.
Yes.
But let's say the seller wants to remedy it. Okay, fine. I'll change the AC, no problem, but I can't get it done for tomorrow. The buyer doesn't have to extend.
Right.
It's just not required. It's not legally required.
No.
Okay, very interesting. The other thing I wanted to mention in reference to remedies is when we talk about giving them money, sometimes it's like, okay, well, this thing can be done, but the person can't get there right now. You can put money in escrow. Like you could be like, the title company is going to hold the $500 until the plumber gets there next week.
Yes.
But everyone's okay with that. And the money will be released when the repair is done. Meanwhile, the closing happens, buyer can move in, whatever. Because the other problem with walkthroughs is you're right. You're a minute before moving.
Yeah. Sometimes
It's like, even the buyer feels like they're in duress. The seller feels like they're in duress. Everyone is like, we have to remedy this quickly because the ship has left the port.
Yeah.
Like, we got to do this. So escrow works great for that because sometimes the seller doesn't want to give the money directly to the buyer. They don't feel comfortable with that. And then you can also reduce price, increase the closing costs.
Well, I was told because of TRID, you can't
reset
change,
it.
Yeah, you can't change any of the loan terms.
Yeah.
So
if it was a cash sale, I guess, though, the only way you could do
matter.
that. Yeah.
But if you tweak anything with the loan terms.
So escrow really comes into play.
You have to do escrow.
I know.
What do you think about post-occupancy when you can't do a walkthrough because they're staying living there?
And, really in the last couple of years with the inventory situation, a lot of sellers have the leverage to be like, I want occupancy, right? Like, I don't want to have to be out for closing. I mean, I've had my own sellers, the majority of them in the last 2 years have gotten occupancy. So they don't, because I negotiate that for them because that's what they need.
Right.
And I'm like, and the buyers are just desperate to find a house. So they're like, okay. Hopefully it's not so much occupancy that they haven't packed.
Right.
And that you can kind of get a feel. But it really is, I do an occupancy addendum every time.
Yeah. And try to just get enough of a deposit to where if something goes wrong.
Right. Like, here's $2,000 that's going to be the deposit if something is damaged during the move out. But it is hard because... Yeah, but if you do the occupancy addendum the way it is done in our MLS, you're providing insurance for your things. You're like having insurance for liability. Like, you're going to leave the house in exactly the same condition as, you're supposed to. Like, it's all accounted for.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it is a little harder. What do you do? Do you do anything different?
Yeah, pretty much the same thing. We use that addendum. And then sometimes the title company will withhold like $5,000 of the seller's proceeds.
Yeah.
Until they are out of the house and the buyer has done a final walkthrough and told the title company they can release the
Everything's
funds.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Usually everyone is okay with that.
Yeah.
If your seller isn't okay with that, then you have to kind of dig deeper. Are you trying to do something sketchy? Like, it's okay. We have to let everyone be comfortable.
Sure.
So, but I know it's rough as a buyer because you really didn't have a lot of bargaining chips.
I think you have to be careful because when we get busy, it's one of the easiest things to skip.
Yeah.
Because you assume it's not going to be a problem. Everything's going to be fine until it's not.
I know. Look, I had an investor recently was like buying an investment to rent out. She was like, there's no way I can go. I only barely have time to get to the closing. I'm like, well, someone's walking through, so I'll go. I'll take video. I'll make sure everything is where it was supposed to be. Do I want to do that every time? No, but definitely someone has to go. Like, you can't just not go.
Yeah.
It's not optional as far as I'm concerned. But I have had on a time or two where a buyer's like, I can't, I'm not worried about it. And I'm like, I'm worried about it.
Right.
I'll go.
Right.
And even then I'll sometimes still get them to sign a walkthrough saying that everything is okay.
Yeah.
Because you can easily do like a video while you do it, like live. You can take a video and show them later. You can take pictures, whatever. Like,
I have an investor who has bought several homes. He's my only investor that I haven't fired him.
Okay.
But he also, I've had to set some boundaries with him. He buys in places that I would not feel comfortable going by myself,
Right.
especially. And so I've told him, like, I don't know if I can work with you and help you. So what he does is he just drives by and he always offers sight unseen. Okay.
Yeah.
So I was helping him buy this house. Put it this way, the house had no doors. So he did not need me to go.
Get in and
He
out.
just called me out of the blue one day and was like, hey, I just saw this house. Will you write it up, for $45,000? And I'm like,
sure.
who showed you the house? He's like, oh, no, I just walked in. There's no doors. I was like, okay.
So
okay,
trespassing, cool.
Yeah, great trespassing.
Way to start out on the right foot.
Right. So I wrote the offer. It got accepted. Everything was fine. It was a cash sale. Was it a cash sale? Or did that matter? No, not a cash sale. He was getting financing, but it was some sort of investor thing. So I had never been to the house. He did his own little walkthrough, knew he's gutting and replacing everything.
Right.
This is why I haven't fired him.
Right.
Because he's easy. Yeah, he doesn't care. And so it was during COVID, and they put a hold on all VA loan foreclosures.
Oh, right.
And apparently that the previous owner had a VA loan on this home, and they have to investigate it to make sure that the foreclosure was not COVID related. And if it was, they were going to make some exceptions. So we had to do like a 2-month extension. Okay. Because this had to be investigated. That's what it was.
I remember this story.
It was a cash sale. But it was still.
It was on the other end.
It was this. Yes, it was on the other end that we had to be delayed. So he's like, okay, well, that's fine. We'll just wait. We'll just do an extension, So we do a 2-month extension. And so I'm not going to do a final walkthrough. He can go do his own final walkthrough.
You're like, oh.
He always does. He just goes and does his own final walkthrough. So I get a call from the listing agent, and she's like, Alyssa.
There's trouble.
Yes. And I'm like, what? What happened? And we're closing like that afternoon. She's like, I went to get my sign. No lockbox because there's no door. Except there are doors now. And the house has been renovated. And I'm like, what? And she's like, yeah. And I'm supposed to send like the VA foreclosure a walkthrough video showing like the house is same as it was. And I'm like, I still don't understand. So she sends me these pictures. I'm like, wow, it looks great. And she's like, yeah, I don't know what to do. So I called him. I called my buyer. I'm like, did you tell Miguel that closing had gotten extended? He's like, sure I did. Well, I don't know. Maybe I forgot to tell him. He forgot to tell his contractor. And this contractor, he uses him for all of his things. And he lives in them while he renovates them. Yeah. That's just like his little thing that he has with my client. Did not get the memo. So the house was done pretty much.
And he'd been living there.
Yeah. I called the listing agent back, who was thankfully great, and explained what happened. And she was like, here's what we're going to do. We're going to close.
As soon as possible.
This afternoon. Go sign right now. We're just going to close this out. I mean, but technically, I guess, the VA could have been like, thanks for renovating this house for us. We're going to keep it now.
Yeah. We're going to hold this foreclosure.
Yeah. Now we'll sell it for way more.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. It was so crazy.
The one and only time a house was way better than when.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Isn't that interesting?
Right. People do the weirdest stuff. I had an instance where the house I was selling, my listing, had a big workshop in the back where they did they worked on cars. And it had this car lift. And during the repair negotiation, the buyer's agent said, well, look, they would like to have this, or something about the car lift. I'm like, look, the guy's willing to leave. He was taking it with him because it was worth a couple $1,000s. And I'm like, look, he's willing to leave the car lift. It's worth at least $2,000 in lieu of repairs. So he doesn't have to move it. They can sell it or use it or whatever. And she was like, okay, fine. Like, it worked out. A couple of weeks go by and she's like, really having some trouble. Nobody wants to buy this car lift and it's not really worth $2,000. And you said it was worth $2,000. It's only worth $900. And I'm like, okay, one, I don't know anything about car lifts.
No.
So this is what the seller told me. She's like, I mean, does he have a buyer for that? And I'm like, I have no clue. Let me find out. So I call him. I'm like, hey, do you know someone that wants to buy this thing? He was like, no, I was just going to put it on like Facebook Marketplace. It's really easy to sell stuff like that, blah, blah, blah. It's not the first one I've sold, on and on. So I tell her, I'm like, look, he doesn't have a buyer. He was simply going to put it on Facebook Marketplace and sell it. And, she says, well, I have to handle this for my buyer because they're very upset. And I told them that it would be easy to sell. I'm like, first of all, I don't know why she was inserting herself into this deal. But I'm like, well, do what you want to do. She's like, I'm going to list it on Facebook Marketplace. I'm like, okay, fine. Well, I guess nowhere in my world did I think she would like go to the house and sell it
that they don't
before
own yet.
Closing.
Oh my gosh.
One day, randomly on a Saturday, she calls and is like, hey, we're going to be at the house. I'm showing someone the car lift. I'm like, fine, fine. I know you're trying to sell it. You can show it to them, whatever. Several hours go by and she calls and she's like, hey, listen, I just wanted to tell you we'll be here a couple more hours. It's taking a while to take it down. I'm like,
oh no.
I'm like, come again? It's taking a while to do what? What did you say?
Oh no.
Yeah, we found a buyer for that car lift and they brought a trailer and they came from like an hour out of town. So, I mean, they've got to get it done.
It's not yours. You haven't closed.
I'm like,
oh no.
Okay. How much did they buy the car lift for? Oh, for the $2,000. I'm like, okay, great, because that's what we told the buyer it was going to be worth. But all of this is so weird. I'm like, okay. I'm like, what? You can't just take it. Like, it's not closed yet. It's fine if they want to come back in a week after closing and get it, but you can't. No. Well, they're already halfway through it. I mean, I thought you said we could sell it. I'm like,
when you own it. When you own it.
You can't sell something that's not yours. I'm like, this is crazy. She's like, well, I've got the cash right here. And I'm like, oh, hold please.
So what'd y'all do? Hold the cash?
I call the seller and I'm like, I was so livid about this situation. Because it put me in a really bad position. He's out of town. He moved out of town. I call and tell him what's going on. He's like, well, I guess get the money and then we'll just, like we can hold it until closing. So first of all, on like a Saturday.
Okay, on a Saturday.
I have to jump in my car to meet an agent and strangers who are removing this car lift and so I could collect the money. Because she's like, oh, I'm so hungry. I wish I could get a drink. I've been here all day babysitting them. I'm like, well, fair enough. You can't let strangers run amok at the house.
I'm
it's
surprised
not even
she
yours.
wasn't like, I'll come back later when y'all finish.
I was so mad. She hands me the money. She's like, well, look, it really wasn't $2,000. It was only $1,800. And I'm like, I can't with this right now. If the seller's upset, I'll just give him $200 because this is outrageous. I took the money praying that I don't get attacked or I'm like, just get out of here. And then I leave. I tell him I have the money. We wait until closing day and then I give them the money back.
Wow.
I was beside myself.
That is so crazy.
Who would even think that was, but y'all, you cannot assume that people have common sense, that they understand the process, that they understand what it, this is exactly why you have to do a walkthrough.
Yeah.
Like, you have no clue what people are doing or thinking.
I've had people take toilet paper holders.
I had someone take the toilet seat.
Oh.
Why? It was like one of those foamy ones. And when my buyer was like a single guy and we noticed it in the walkthrough. In fact, he did not notice it. I noticed it. And I said, hey, man, you're going to need to run to Home Depot after closing and grab a toilet seat. And he was like, what? I'm like, they took that green foamy one. You don't want that anyway.
No.
And he was like, okay, yeah, no problem. But the truth of the matter is they weren't allowed to take it.
Right. You should have gotten $30.
But again, this is what I like to call client management. Could I have made him angry about it and been like irate and like, we need a toilet seat? Yeah. No, I was like, hey, dude, you're going to have to take $20-$30 and go over to the Home Depot and get yourself a toilet seat.
This is not a big deal. Probably for the best. It's all in presentation.
It's all about the presentation.
Yeah.
Because buying a home comes with some responsibility, right?
Yeah. It's not going to be.
He didn't toss a fuss at all. I was just like, hey, you didn't notice this, but I'm seeing there's no toilet seat.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, oh, okay. Sure, I'll go get one.
Wow.
Weird stuff. People take the
Yeah,
weirdest
they do.
stuff.
They do.
But a lot of times they take weird stuff and the buyer's like, I wasn't going to keep that anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So thanks.
Like bathroom mirrors,
Oh, the bathroom mirrors.
TV mounts.
Yeah.
What else has become a
Problem. It's always the window coverings. And, funnily enough, I feel like our purchase agreement says the window coverings and like all associated, whatever the wording is, it seems very clear. It means curtains, blinds.
Is it on your window?
Rods.
It stays.
If it's there, it stays. But there's been a lot of hemming and hawing about this and it seems like, I mean, no disrespect, sometimes it seems to be more male agents that are like, well, I mean, it didn't say curtains. I'm like, that's a window covering.
Right.
This is just semantics.
I had a situation where the house had a koi pond.
Oh God, they took the fish.
They took the fish and the
Yeah.
buyers were irate. Like, we don't want a pond. We want a koi pond with koi fish. And the seller was like, well, these are my pets. These are my pets.
I mean, I can kind of see it both
Me too.
ways.
Me too.
It's not a
Yeah.
koi pond without koi, and those definitely seem like pets.
Yeah, and they're expensive.
Right. So you really have to walk through to catch all of that. But you also have to sort of think in advance when you're
Mhm.
looking at a particular house, what could be a problem?
Yes.
A swing set, a fountain, right. Anything that's
Pool equipment.
Oh my gosh, yes, the pool equipment. Like there are a lot of the appliances that make the washer, dryer, fridge. Are they staying? Are they not? Were they in the contract? Were they not? Like all these things.
Yeah. I've had a seller take grandma's rose bushes out the flower bed.
Yeah, not allowed.
Yeah.
Unless you tell us
Right.
beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
I've had clients who were like, this was a great one. This was pretty recently. Hey, all of our light bulbs, we changed out to those LED smart bulbs where we
Oh,
can talk to
gosh.
them. And we need to take them all with us when we go. But and we hadn't even done the inspection yet. And I'm like, okay, you need all of your light bulbs to be changed before the inspection. Because if they come in here and find out what you have and they want it, they're going to want it. But if you change it to where it was going to look the same
Right.
and it's just a regular switch, like they had it programmed to their phone.
Right. Yeah.
I need the door lock. I need the doorbell. I need this. I need the cameras. Okay, fine. But we have to know all of this up front.
Right.
At the walkthrough where when you're packing up to leave is not the time for us to discover that you're taking anything that was installed. The
Yeah.
dining room light fixture.
Yeah.
No.
Mm-mm.
And don't leave stuff behind either.
Right.
Don't take things you're not supposed to take and don't leave things behind. You really have to have some forethought.
You do. You do.
And be like, this is why in the templates,
Yeah.
again, we have ones that are important for the seller and the buyer in regards to this. Like, but especially the seller, stay in line. These are the rules.
The thing with walkthroughs is that typically they are not a problem.
Typically, but I find
But
them
when
to be,
they are a problem,
they're
it's a
incredibly
big problem.
nerve-wracking.
Yes. Yes.
because I'm like, I don't feel good about it until I'm done.
Right.
And I'm like waiting to look at my buyer and be like, are you happy?
Yeah. Are you good? I can't really read you right now.
Right. Is everything okay?
Right.
Because I don't know.
Mm.
And then I just be like, it's so great.
Yes.
I
so
love this
happy.
yard. But a lot of times they're like, it's so dirty. And I'm like,
I know. That's the number one complaint.
And I'll just be like, I'm really sorry. Cleanliness, unfortunately, is subjective. They haven't done anything wrong per the contract, and you'll just have to clean it.
Welcome to home ownership.
I know, and I feel bad.
Welcome to home ownership. You have
Right.
to clean your
I've
house.
heard stories of like sellers taking all the fruit off of a fruit tree.
Oh my
like,
gosh.
Just like the plants, but
Yeah.
anything is possible.
Right.
Anything is possible. And it is all covered in the contract, but nobody reads that.
Mm-mm.
So you need to be familiar with your contract and be able to paraphrase it for your buyers and your sellers.
Yeah.
So they know what to expect. But if someone wants to take something like a dining room light fixture and they tell me on the front end, because I ask, is there anything attached to the house that you need to take? When I'm doing my pre-listing, I'm like, you have to change that now.
Yeah. Before we hit live.
I understand that your light fixture is beautiful and that is why you want to take it. But it might be also the reason why someone sees this dining room and is like, I love this house.
Right.
You got to just change it out. Change it out now. I had a recent client with like a really cute breakfast room fixture. She said, I looked everywhere for it. It wasn't very expensive, but I would like to take it. And the more we talked about it, I'm like, okay, well, you have to replace it before we list because it's very cute. Right. And I think it would draw some attention. So you've got to, and she's like, I'll find another one. I don't even know if I really need it. A lot of times when you push the seller and you're like, okay, that's okay. You can keep it, but you have to do it now. Then suddenly they're like, well, I don't really want to
become a negotiating item.
Right. Yeah. But that's the easiest way to end up with angry buyers, angry agents is take something you're not supposed to.
Yeah.
The bathroom mirror. It's always the bathroom mirror.
I know.
Why? Why do they want the mirrors so bad?
I know. It's so weird. When I moved, I was lucky to like get everything I needed out.
Right.
It was so hard, let alone take extra things.
Yeah. Oh, and then of course the furniture brokering we won't get into, but a lot of times people are like, I want to keep this or I wanted that. Can I buy this outside of closing? I'm like, I don't sell furniture, but I have more than I would like to admit.
Yeah.
Okay.
It happens.
Anything else on walking through?
I think that's it.
Great. I love it. Just remember it's important and you must do it. No exception.
Yeah.
No exceptions. Okay, toast. You ready? Jessica Price is toasting to Leslie Shin in Savannah, Georgia.
Okay.
I would like to toast Leslie Shin. She is not only the best stepmom, but she has also been a good mentor. She has really encouraged me to pursue real estate and also told me about your podcast.
That's sweet.
I haven't taken this new career I wouldn't have taken this new career leap if it wasn't for her.
That's so sweet.
I love
and
that.
It's your stepmom.
I know.
That's wonderful.
That's awesome. Cheers to Leslie and thank you to Jessica. Y'all go out there and do your final walkthrough.
Sign your forms.
Don't forget your forms. Goodbye.
Thank you so much for tuning in to the Hustle Humbly podcast.
If you enjoyed this episode, please go to ratethispodcast.com/hustlehumbly and leave us a review or drop a comment if you're listening on Spotify.
If you have an episode topic or someone you'd like to toast on the show, please email us at team@hustlehumblypodcast.com.
Find us on social media at Hustle Humbly Podcast. Don't forget to find all of the free resources at hustlehumblypodcast.com/resources.
See you next week.